Okay. Hello again. Show is difficult to get off the ground, but we're going now. Me, Casey, Cavi, we're all here in our first zonas. We're ready to go. Have you guys welcome everyone to the Mystical American Patriot Society, as it's still called for right now. We're thinking, I don't know if you're aware of this, Casey slash Dog Moon. Um, but we are in the process of rebranding the show. Are you familiar with this? Have you caught up with this?
I mean, I thought I was up to speed. I've been a little bit distracted lately. By the way, that was a great episode with Owen. I can't believe I get to follow that. But yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
he's a good dude.
Yeah, is this season 4 then, or
Well,
oh
no,
yeah,
it's still season three. I think this will be what we're gonna do is we're just gonna have a new show with the same RSS feed. So it's gonna be, and then we'll call that season one Prime,
mhm,
the new one, and
yeah.
it's gonna be called Soul. Have you seen the pictures?
No.
The pictures. It's gonna be called Soul, and it's gonna be like the Shell gas station with the yellow shell.
Mhm. Oh, I did see
Imagine
this.
that, but instead
Yeah,
of Shell, it says Soul.
got it. Perfect.
Because we finally figured out what this show is. For years I've been trying to figure out what this show is. And uh the other night on Telegram, someone Hazel, I think it was, revealed to me that what this show actually is it is a spiritual gas station. And I think that's correct.
Mhm.
It's a pit stop you make on your journey to wherever you are, right? And on your spiritual journey, and there are no wrong paths here. It's like because it's got the shell. This is why it was perfect. That little shell, the shell. That's the same symbol that has been used forever on pilgrims on the way of Saint James in Europe. Do you know that?
No, is that okay? No, I didn't know that. I was gonna
Because
ask,
the
is that a
idea
real?
is,
I was
so
gonna
all
ask
the
if that's
lines on the shell go to one place. So it's like you can come from any place, but
I see.
you're going to end up at the same goal. There are many paths up the mountain, is what I'm trying to say, as evidenced by the shell. And wherever you're going, you're going to need a pit stop now and again. And this is what this show basically is. And that fits because I've spent most of my life in various gas stations. I think I don't know about you, but gas stations have played a central role in my life forever because I think I've probably traveled more miles by car than most of humanity. I don't know how much you drive.
I mean, I love a gas station. Yeah,
I
I'm a big
The
fan.
gas stations are perfect. It's the perfect thing. Shells is now my favorite. I don't know if it was, but it now is because it goes with that. But yeah, so that's we're gonna rebrand, and it's gonna be good. We're gonna hopefully tie the Substack into it, and the Mystical American Patriot Society is still gonna exist, but that is gonna be the elite group of donors that are in the Telegram channel, and that's the society where we plan all of our secret anti-Masonic plots. That's the goal.
Yeah, it sounds great.
I think that's going to be good. But yeah, so that's what we're doing because I I I realize I think that this I don't know if I don't know if this show has ever been helpful to you as a listener, but some people have said that this show has helped them in various ways, and I think that that's what because the show really doesn't give you everything that you need. It's just like you're on your own journey, and here's a little boost.
It's like
Here's
we're
a place
all
to
moving through the Van Allen radiation belt together here.
It isn't like that. That's a terrible metaphor, but
Okay.
but but I see what you're kind of saying. So, yes. So that's what we're doing. What did you think about the? You said you liked the interview with Owen. What was your? Did you?
Oh, I mean, he's just like a John Smoltz fastball to me. Like he's just like he's on it. I mean, I love his art and stuff. I've always enjoyed those cartoons, but like his concerns about Catholicism and Mormonism and Neoplatonism and Greek philosophy and stuff, it's just like I mean these are my people. That's like and that's like that's what I mean. Like that's some people have referred to the invisible church or something like
Yeah.
I don't know what to me it might even be my ethnicity. It's like spiritual swingers in a way. Like I have a very hard time settling I'm 46 now, and I mean I have tried, like I've definitely studied this stuff, but I just have I mean I can't conclude anything.
Hmm.
So as a result, like yeah, the shell metaphor is great for me. I have, it's not that I'm unconcerned either. It's not like a light, it's not, but this is like right now I'm overwhelmed at the fact that, there's a total solar eclipse rolling through America again on April 8th. Like there
Yeah.
was a probably fake moon landing yesterday. There's a
Hmm.
full moon out my window that's like much smaller than usual.
Right.
And also like I'm not sure if I'm being like, am I being like ironic or funny or not? You know what I mean? And those things aren't clear to me.
You don't know
Um,
if you're being ironic yourself.
yeah, like I've lost track. Like, is it,
Yeah.
are, like seriously, the moon looks small, but I also know it's probably not like, it's probably not. Like, why would they do that? They wouldn't do that as a psyops. So like what I'm saying is like the whole kind of schizo internet that I think some of us have traversed.
Hmm.
It's like it's an initiation cult or something,
It
and like
really
one,
is. It's
yeah,
an initiation into like a mystery religion.
yeah, and the thing is like you can choke on it, but it's more fun to just kind of embrace it, I guess. But the problem is that you do have, like, we're recording this, for example, and
Right.
as we were saying, I think before the show, like, I mean, this is going to go down in history as one of the central intellectual spiritual movements of the early 21st, of the new axial age.
Hmm.
And I mean, part of my concern is that like my great grandchildren may not understand, like, I don't know whether, like, am I, that's what I'm saying, is like, is this a joke? Like, it'll turn out to be a joke, it, you know, maybe, but it might also not be. Like, maybe we really are overturning, you know, 2000 and 27,000 years of human history right now, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
well, like I was saying on the show with Owen, this is a time that is unprecedented because
yes.
the internet is the printing press times 1,000 in terms of
Totally.
like disruption.
Yeah.
Like
And so like
it's
today
yeah,
I was like, because I mean, think like like I said, I'm 46, so I grew up with it and I've never been able to turn away from like the internet. It's
right, right,
obviously the only logical innovation that matters,
right.
you know, in our time. And so like you can get, I mean, I'm not only head in the clouds. Like I spent all day today reading about like the Lollards and their 12 conclusions, and like England in the 12th and 13th century, Little Hugh of Lincoln and the bubonic plague and all that stuff.
Hmm.
And it's like, it's interesting, but then, yeah, to pull up to 10,000 feet, like Owen has a tendency to do, and to think about like the way his brain goes, it's either Catholicism or like post-Mormon paganism or something. Like that's so true. That is exactly what it feels like. He said he feels like he's either in the castle of, theology or out in the desert. And
Right.
I think for many of us, our minds are in both those places now simultaneously. And also, you're supposed to keep your third foot, in quote unquote consensus reality where you have to like still make money and talk to your neighbors and stuff. And like, you know what I mean? And they aren't concerned about the castle or the desert. And
I
so
gotta be
it's
honest.
just,
I think I have left the third foot completely almost now. I have left consensus. I've left consensus. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I have like I still talk to people, but I'm in a
yeah.
different place. And I don't know if it's a good place or a bad place. It's a place that probably a lot of people that have not done well in life have ended up, but also people that have done very well have ended up.
No, but I think like we're looking to you to do that, like to be the one, you know what I mean? It's like we need someone to just forge ahead and take their third foot out of the consensus reality and see if the next iteration can happen. And if it can, then everything I've been saying won't be a joke at all. It's only
Right.
you know what I mean? It's only a
It's only a
joke if,
joke if it doesn't work.
yeah, and I need a
Yeah.
defensive mechanism to sort of not sound crazy to my grandchildren or something. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so many people. This is why the irony is there so prevalently on this sort of I don't know what we even call it anymore, this sort of like alternative philosophy side of the internet where everyone is going back and re-questioning everything from, you know, fundamental religious doctrines to the shape of the planet is like, um, well, if I say it sort of ironically, then if it turns out it was all wrong, then I can pretend like, haha, I was just
Yes.
joking. Um, and that is a standard defense mechanism when you're going into a new place, you know, and or a
Mhm.
new. But at some point, you just have to. Yeah, you're right. You have to either go forward or fall back at some
Well,
point.
because like Owen said, he goes to these parties or whatever, with the normie
Yeah.
person, and he like these things kind of he mentions something like this, and then he says, then I have to either decide whether to abandon ship or give them like a 12-minute monologue. And actually, when he said that, I was like, 12 minutes, like, dude, that's an incredible elevator pitch. Because I could literally easily spend 12 hours talking to him, I'm sure.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and by the way, that's what Platonic dialogues actually were. They were like an all-day conversation, you know.
Yeah.
Like that's how long it takes to actually talk about like the one and the many, for example, because it
Yeah.
swallows up like all things must be considered. And at the end of the day, you might kind of get there, but like, yeah, it takes 12 hours or so of conversation. And most
Hmm.
people have an attention span of like 15 seconds now.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's weird to have it where we like got here. Like, if you listen to old Terrence McKenna videos,
Yeah.
he talks about the internet and he said that the internet is we're building the landing pad for the aliens. It's just not physical as we
Mm.
thought it would be. And it's weird sort of getting on the other side of that and seeing he was kind of right. Like it's bringing in an entire alien mode of thinking for good and bad, you know, like completely overturning everything in every direction.
Yeah. Well, see,
And
it's like a uninstallation. Like we're removing the software, but like the hardware is kind of still here, but you can't operate hardware without software. I think, is that true
right,
as a analogy? So like right now, yeah, we've, uninstalled Windows or whatever, or whatever, but no one knows.
what the new software is going to be.
Yeah, like there's just nothing. And so I feel like, and there are, by the way, like kind of parallels. That's why I spend a lot of my time reading everything from like I like, from about the 6th century BC to like the 2nd century AD. That whole kind of period is kind of the last time this happened, where all things were like up for grabs and huge realignments of identity and meaning were happening,
Hmm.
and like so, and then like, I mean, I think that's kind of what Christianity was. Like it's this kind of descent into reality of logos, of like order, and it kind of worked as an operating system. But I think like as you've pointed out, I think effectively over the last 10 or 30 shows, like like I understand so many people and their inclination. I've been among them who want to like find the right answer in
Yeah.
their particular sect or religion or even
Find
politics.
the true
Yeah,
quote
this is
unquote
it. This is going
church.
to solve it for
This
us.
is
But
it.
in fact, I think that if you give it some time, like if you give it 7 years, let's say, to I think Camus said it takes 10 years to have an idea of one's own. Like, so
Hmm.
give it a decade of, and if you still feel like, oh, you're on the right thing, well, I guess, fine. But for me, 10 years, I'll go through like 3 or 4 different like or like what's that called? Weltanschauungs, like worldviews. And it's not on purpose. It's just because I kind of exhaust one and it starts to feel like right now I finished my New Testament reading this year. I started on
Hmm.
January 1st. And so I just finished that. And so now I got to read the Old Testament. But there's a part of me that's like, "Ugh, I don't even want to. I just did it last year. Like I'm bored."
Right.
And like that's you have to acknowledge that in yourself. You have to go like that's I mean, I understand like there are people who push through that and they go, I want to be a saint, so I'm just going to keep doing it or something. But for me, I actually might read the Upanishads this year, instead again
Hmm. Hmm.
or something. I don't know, or like do push-ups. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. But
I don't
anyway, I
think
just
like
loved
all these
Owen's
people
whole
online that think they found the answer. I know what
yeah.
that's going to happen to them because I've seen it happen 1,000 times. You think you do, and
Mhm.
then you sit in it for a while. They're in a honeymoon phase with whatever thing they have. Like it was years ago, it was Catholicism for people. Now it's like Orthodoxy. Then they're going to drop it for Sufi
Yeah.
Islam or
Yeah.
something. I don't, but it's you will never. The idea that you'll find like the thing that answers all the questions doesn't work, and it doesn't work for anybody, and it only especially it can't work now. Like it maybe could work. That's what I mean. It maybe could work even as recently as 50 years ago when to get new information, you had to go to the library and like have them order a book and wait 6 weeks and then come back and then sit down and read it and
Mhm.
then to get the next one. Now with all the information at your fingertips all the time, and then on top of that the layer of like, well, what is real and what is fake, this epistemology crisis we're going through with like
Mhm.
everything, which is going to get 10 times worse with AI and the ability to make fake videos and stuff on a whim. uh Now you're just like all of that falls apart.
Yeah.
There is no, and I think what my long-term project, I'm realizing, because you start something, you don't really realize what you're trying to do fully.
Right. Right.
But I think my long-term project is trying to cut a path through that so that people can see like how to be certain in uncertainty, maybe, or which I think is just another way of having faith, another way of saying that.
It is. It is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, like that's the other thing is that's why I said earlier there's like I mean to let Cavi jump in here, but I like and defend the Southern Baptist Convention as the one true church or something. But I just want to say, like, to me, it is very serious.
I don't think Cavi, he
Yeah, that
can if
was a
he wants,
joke.
but I don't think he's going. Okay, okay.
That was a joke. But I mean, like, it is very serious. Like, it's not a joke to me. And
Hmm.
when I say, like, I think a couple 5 years ago or something, I kind of crystallized this version of how have you ever like have you ever like I think you guys were talking about this, and like kind of arrived at an understanding of Christianity that's eccentric enough that it's like, well, everyone else must be wrong and this is right. Like it's almost like I arrived at this idea that was so peculiar that it's like, well, the apostles misunderstood Jesus, but I understand him, which is,
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
some way is kind of I understand it's like sort of absurd, but it's also it feels kind of true
It's both
to
true
me.
and not true at the same time because
Yeah,
like the apostles knew Jesus in one way, that's
right.
true. But we have a different perspective from seeing everything that's happened in the 2000 years hence, and that gives you like a we can see him in a different light.
Yeah,
Like they really did think that he was going to come back in their lifetime, and
right.
he
Well,
did
they
not.
were all like,
Right? So
very distinctly like Jewish in Jerusalem, in and around
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Jerusalem,
yeah.
like as the Romans are about to attack. And it's like, it's such a, I mean, first of all, it's awesome that it happened then. I mean, it did have to happen at that moment. And I have whole reasons for like why. Like there's something so important about the timing of Christianity. But yeah, like, so now there's like this kind of residue of like true meaning in it still. But yeah, it's not like, Jerusalem itself, the temple isn't there. Like the Jews we have now aren't, I mean, you know what I mean? It's not like the
Right.
situation is different. Let's just put it that way. And so, yeah, like I think it needs, frankly, like I don't know, kind of retelling or something.
It needs like well, it needs
It's frustrating because the problem is that like how many people you're losing when you speak like this. I know
well,
that
I
like 95% of listeners are like, oh, here's a heretic. I'm going to
yeah,
church
yeah.
on Sunday. This guy's going to hell. But like I I urge them to continue listening because I'm very serious, Like
Yeah,
that's all I can say, I guess.
yeah, so like the first century Christianity with Paul and Peter is very in some sense narrow in that their context of doing it, and yes, they did go around the Roman world, right? But even that is so much in some ways smaller than what we're dealing with.
Mhm.
like they lived. Peter lived the first 30 I don't know years of his life basically in one town, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And they went as far as he could walk on his feet or ride a horse or a donkey,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And that's just a different and so now I think what we're trying to do and what the task is at hand now is to take that and like, okay, can it actually be a worldwide thing that
Yes.
encompasses,
Like,
and it hasn't been up to now, if we're honest, it's been because
yeah.
until the internet, yes, there was like Christianity, but if you like actually examine what was happening, Christianity in England was extremely different than what they were doing in Spain, for example. And so, like, it was sort of like global, but also not. And now we're like on this, like, all those different ways of doing it are converging. And there's like, how does that happen? And that's the task at hand, I think, to make that. And unfortunately, as I mentioned with Owen, it doesn't seem like any of the official church leaders are interested in this problem, other than to just abandon everything they believe and say, "Well, I guess we just sing Kumbaya." Like
Yeah, I
that is
mean,
not a good answer either, right?
I haven't seen very good leadership. And if I have, it's been like sporadic and almost random which, church or affiliation or whatever it's been with. So, yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. I
yeah.
mean,
There's
like
been
yeah,
and it is because they are so narrow. They don't, in my opinion, like they are unable to working within the boxes that they're set in, they're unable to come up with the answers. And that box may be dogmatic, a
and
dog, or it may be like a dogmatic, like a dogma of the church, or it may be a box defined by their boomer sensibility that the moon landing really happened. Like that sort of like craziness, like like
right.
that things are because uh, I think what at least this project has been, and I think other people is like there is a real mystery in this world, and there is like real magic, like honest to God magic
Mhm. Mhm.
happening alongside the technocracy and the technology. And in fact, that those two, as C.S. Lewis predicted, are going hand in hand. He wrote a whole little dissertation about the 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 coming of the techno mage, basically, and how
Mhm.
that would be and we're here and it's like, well, and they're I just it feels like they're unable to see what to do, and that's not an indictment on them as like leaders or pastors or whatever. I think they're doing the best they can. It's just I don't know. I don't
Well, the other thing is
they
there's
don't have
such
tools.
like this there's a really long there's a first of all very interesting debate about how whether or not whether or not like hierarchy and priestcraft is the way, or whether people should grow up and stop drinking milk, as it says in Hebrews 5, and start eating solid food and discerning for themselves. And like this is, there's reflections of this in discourse between Catholic and Protestant often, but
Mhm.
it actually even transcends that. Like you find it in, Buddhist discourse relative to Hinduism, or
Yeah, yeah.
even in like philosophy, like there's this like one of Plato's dialogues, the Parmenides, is I think it's kind of the only one where Socrates kind of is stumped by his dialogue partner, who is Parmenides in that one. Parmenides was older at the time of the dialogue, and they talk about the most abstract. It's such a dense dialogue, but there's this part in it where Parmenides calls the dialectic, which is what we're doing, like
Yeah, right.
the trying to figure it out. He calls it a workmanlike game, which is, I think, just such a fascinating term, right? It's like because it's like it's play. Like it has to bring the spirit of play to it, and
Hmm.
not like organized t-ball where there's dads telling you where to run and stuff, but like you have to remember play, like in a field somewhere with your friends where you make up the rules as you go when you were 6.
Yeah,
But
I
also it's serious. Like there's a
yes.
serious stakes to this play. And
Yeah. It,
yeah, so like I'm not sure we can like I feel that I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm a priest. Maybe that's why I feel like this. But it's it's questionable to me whether we can rely on the priests to do that for us because I feel like they've dropped the ball a little bit in our time.
I mean, they've definitely dropped the ball. I like you're saying with play. I feel like you have to try on ideas like you try on a jacket or you try on a hat, and you put them on and you see how does this feel? Does this
Mhm.
work? Can I move in this? Does it keep me warm? And then you take it out and you build your wardrobe sort of piecemeal like that. And it has to actually what people have forgotten basically is that this stuff has to actually work. That's the real thing. They say all these things like, oh, well, this is this and this is that. It's like, well, then
Yeah.
why do you keep losing everywhere all the time?
Mhm.
If it's so great, why are you always losing and you're making no ground
Right.
and you've lost everything in the culture war and the actual wars? And this is why I respond to Greek Orthodox Ortho Bros all the time, and no hate. I get mad at them because they do the same thing that everyone does, where they're like, oh well, ours is the right one,
Mhm.
and if you just come over here, all the problems will be solved. And then I say, well, then why did you lose Constantinople? If God's so on your side, why did you lose your main center to the Muslims and have never recovered? You know, it's like it's
Yeah.
this
Well,
triumphalism is unearned.
I 100% understand what you're saying, but I also lately, and probably, I think it sounds like the show has been doing this too. I mean, moving in the direction of soul, in probably in response, like as maybe you could even say as a cope for the fact that we're losing politically. But my soul,
Yeah, but
my individual,
it's true,
like
but
my,
that's a blessing because
yeah,
it is a blessing
it
to have
is.
to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, because like ultimately, like these political questions are really interesting, but you discover, okay, maybe I don't have any real say in it, and my
Mm-hmm.
life is passing me by, and I do want to get my ducks in a row. And also like I believe it matters. Like I sometimes hear these people talk about like they feel like life is meaningless, whereas I feel just the opposite. I feel like daunted by how meaningful every day feels. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
often feel like I'm shouldering like almost like I'm trying to save the world every day.
Right.
And what's
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
about it is that it wouldn't look like that, I think, from the outside. For example, like Job, who only ever thinks of God, but his life is kind of falling down around him in a disaster. And like, so in some ways, he's like a saint. He's doing it right, but like, nevertheless, he's losing, you know? And I think that's cool too. It's hope, but the necessary cope. Like, die without that. You mentioned the magic is real. It's like, that's what do they call that? Salvation,
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that like you die without that. So don't forget like I mean yeah, like I hope we win and crush the libtards and all that. But like I
Yeah.
I'm
I
gonna
don't
try to
think you.
swim. Yeah.
I don't think. Yeah. I think you have to get past trying to crush the lip. The left is a direction. It's not a thing to
Yeah,
be overcome. It's
it's just another orthodoxy. Like
it's just another. That's right. It's just another orthodoxy, and they're not actually the enemy. That's like another level of distraction. I
mhm,
feel it's like getting lost in the weeds, and in some ways, like I mean, I guess a lot of this started for so many people around 2015 with
mhm,
the craziness of Donald Trump and everything, and it was laid bare for so many people, like just how much hatred and animosity there was in the world for all kinds of things, traditional values, white people, America,
mhm,
Christianity. And people were trying to figure out how to respond to that. And you could go a couple of different ways. And I think most people took the path of we got to fight it, we got to double down, we got to become, some people became Nazis, some people became, and I think but I really, and it can sound like cope to say, well, don't worry about that. Like, and like you can't, but I really think that's the correct answer is like all of that is actually a sideshow to like, there's no winning playing that game. Like, so for example, like Elon Musk, like, so he comes out like he's obviously like this giant globalist shill person. Like, he's obviously working for the dark side.
The
And
most.
yet
Yeah.
he says he comes out and like he pretends he puts on a brief right wing face or whatever, and everyone worships him, even though he is actively creating like an AI hellscape where like Palantir and all these things have an AI program which like this is really happening like in Gaza. Like
Yes.
they decide where they bomb based on an AI algorithm, and it's like Peter Thiel is in charge of it, and
Oh,
everyone's like,
I thought you
"Yay!"
were gonna
You know.
I thought you were gonna say because I one of my favorite books was published in 2010 by this Russian guy named Viktor Pelevin.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Snuff, the acronym SNUFF, and it's
Uh
about
huh.
a war in Ukraine that's fake. Like
Yeah.
it's AI. Like they literally film it on computers and like sort of pump it out to the world, and new technology, weapons and stuff, and none of it's happening. And it's like
Yeah.
I'm kind of it's I mean, okay, I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. Like it literally is to that point. I saw this thing this morning about how back like it was a graph showing the percentage of Americans who feel, quote, little to no trust in the media. And it showed going back to like 1980. And it
Mm-hmm.
was pretty steady from like 1980 to 2000, around like 8 or 10% of people who felt little to no trust in the media. And since 2000, it has gone to 39%, which is like that's a significant shift in how people are experiencing the, quote unquote, the news. Like
Yeah.
many of us are now like, I don't know, maybe, but maybe Gaza doesn't even exist. And,
Yeah.
it's actually just being filmed in like Poland or something. Like, I mean, I don't know.
Well,
Well,
But
it's like that. I posted a video in the Telegram like a few days ago of the so-called war in Ukraine, where the guy's holding up photos of the news of like bombed out buildings and everything, and then he goes to the actual, holds it up in front of the building, and then drops the photo, and the building's completely fine. And he did
yeah.
for like 20 different. So I don't know if there's anything.
like, and I mean, there's, I understand. Again, this is one of those perfect examples where the humor, it's like, I want to make the jokes because I wish we could all just be laughing about this. Because then
Mm-hmm.
it's like when you're laughing, think of, isn't laughter, just as an aside, an interesting, like, it's not, I don't think it's cultural. It's deeper than that. It's like biological. It signals like relaxation and belonging with, I mean, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
if
Laughter
you
is what
picture
happens when you
monkeys,
briefly see reality.
yeah, it's like everyone kind of goes, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
and so I think, but like we can't do it right now because I am very, very aware that 60% of people uh, think any question of this is like, I mean, I don't, it's worse than heresy. Heresy is easy these days, right? Like anyone
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
like piss on Jesus or whatever. There's no penalty for that. But real heresy is questioning the news, you know,
Yeah.
for
Yeah. Yeah.
for many people. And yeah, so like what Cavi said, I mean, they accidentally slip up, show us these weird things.
But here's the thing: it's not an accidental slip up. It is on purpose.
Oh, they have to tell you.
They have to. It's
Yeah.
this, and this is what I mean. Like we've been outlining like the ways the magic works, and they have to tell you for various reasons. Um, but they almost like this is because that's what caught me up for so long. It was like, well, this is clearly fake looking. But then if I say like, oh, but they're so confident and powerful, they can fake landing on planets in the moon and wars.
Right.
Then you have to say, and then they just messed up this little detail, like, oh, but see, because they do it on purpose. Because if you see the seams and 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 then you still like you ignore the subconscious, like that's fake, then you are bought hook, line, and sinker.
Right.
It's a way of you're not bought into it unless it's like the Star Trek episode, unless you see the four lights and you say there are five or
But
three or
like,
whatever.
you know how
That's when they got this soul, which is what they're after.
like I have kids who are in like kind of formative years in public school. So it's, Black History Month.
Yeah, yeah.
They're still teaching them, about Rosa Parks and
Who was
um
also kind of fake.
fake. It's fake.
Yeah, yeah, fake.
I mean,
Very good.
it's you
Yeah,
can look it up. It was planned. They were
yeah.
working with,
It wasn't a
local.
spontaneous thing at all. It was
Yeah,
like a
no, it's fake.
she
And
went to
so
like
it's like
17 different bus stops before she found someone that treated her mildly
exactly. And
upsetly.
so is the fifth section of Anne Frank's diary, and so is I don't know, so much. Like it's like we find out years later, but it's the what you're saying you have to tell us, but like it's very hard for a 12, 13-year-old kid to, because they haven't learned anything else yet. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're not accustomed. It's like you can't raise a kid from age 0 to trust nothing.
Correct.
They need to trust their teachers. They need to trust like other adults, people in the world.
Hmm.
Uh, but everyone's lying to them. And so it's like, I don't know, man.
Well, they're not lying to them. They don't know themselves that it's fake in most all cases. They are
Well,
like the teachers are telling them what they think the truth is, you know.
like, do you
And
know
so,
that most middle schoolers now don't think the moon landing was real? Like
oh yeah,
that's
I
it's
mean,
it's pretty so
we're
it's pretty common. Like, yeah,
yeah.
they're like kind of awake to some of this stuff, and like I think I saw a thing about how like 40% of Gen Z or something is kind of thinks the Holocaust narrative is sus,
Hmm.
and like the point is that it's almost like we're almost like making the mistake of falling into the frame that the establishment would want. Which is like, is it true or not? When in
Yes,
fact,
that's the
it's
thing.
like it's
That's
like
the thing
history.
to avoid. That's the trap. Yeah.
Into your past episodes, it's like history is this like infinite. I mean, literally all the things that have ever happened, and of course that can't be told. So it can only be an editing project. It can only be a
Hmm.
thing where someone is going, this is important, and then these other things aren't. And the
Right.
selection process and the standards that lead to the selection process are like all important and I don't want to say like arbitrary, but like up for grabs for sure, And by the way,
Hmm.
this process is becoming more and more visible. And that's why like middle schoolers are starting to see it because they're like, wait a minute, who's writing these history? Like, why is this the important thing?
Yeah,
Why do
yeah,
we have
yeah.
to, yeah,
History can only ever be an editing process. You're correct. It can only ever be
yeah,
a story, which is why facts aren't actually truth. And that's the thing. Like that's the thing. Like the new
right.
atheist
No,
movement missed
yeah.
is that facts cannot tell the truth because facts absent a narrative mean nothing. There's nothing. There's no there for anything to happen. And so
And that's why going back to your original point about the AI running the war in Gaza, to the extent that that is like, the bombs are being directed by
right.
algorithms, like that's the real like very nefarious part of AI, is that it pretends to be, kind of like like strictly logical,
Yeah, it provides
unbiased
the
or whatever.
narrative.
And it's
Right.
obvious that the oligarchs of the world who are trying to maintain their power, their privilege, are like, trying to set this thing up as the like Oracle of Delphi of the new
Hmm.
age. So you imagine, I mean, you could people like there's that, Neil Stevenson, the sci-fi guy. He wrote that
Yeah, yeah.
book called Seven Eves, I think it was, the one where basically society is divided into like 10% who are kind of hyper literate and they live in these weird monasteries and that's all they do is read, and then the 90% who are just bred in circuses and watching TV and stuff. And it's
Hmm.
like we're very quickly approaching that. Very few people do like think, spend time and read and so on. And so when you've got 90% of a population who just kind of imbibes their opinions, on a date like from NPR, like that morning, and I used to
Right.
circulate among academics, and this is what they do. They like listen to NPR on the way to work, and then that's what they talk about all day. And pretty soon, like, they're an expert on whatever the Supreme Court case is that was decided today, or you know
Right.
what I mean?
It's
But
what
like,
we call the download. They
yeah,
get the
so as soon
download
as
every day. It can
exactly
come in
the
various
download.
things, and it just downloads into their consciousness, and this is what they now think.
And so as
But
soon as
the
like
same
in
thing, but the thing is, people on every side do that.
yeah, oh,
Like,
for sure. Yeah,
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah,
sure. No, it's not about left or right or
yeah,
anything.
yeah.
I mean, you have to really try to like this has to be an intentional thing to detach from this. You have
Hmm.
to I mean, you have to be the guy who's driving 45 minutes to work with no radio on,
Hmm.
and just like and trying not to read the billboards as you go. But yeah, what I was going to say is that in the very near future, they're going to tell us, you'll get in arguments about whatever, about politics or some question. And then, everyone will have their device and they just go, well, let's just look it up on Chat GPT. And then you ask Chat GPT and look,
Yep.
whatever it gives, it's like no one's going to be able to stand up against that because the dummies will say, oh, well, you don't know everything Chat GPT knows. How could you possibly, like, why would your opinion be more valid or valuable than the Oracle,
Right.
And
Well,
so, like, yeah.
it's this is the process of what I've termed morality washing, which
Mhm.
is where the primary purpose of authority figures is to relieve yourself of responsibility to be fully a full agent in the world. And this is like it's been going on forever, but this is like a hyper version of that. Like this is how soldiers are often very physically courageous, but they're not so much morally courageous. And so they'll like go do this, they'll go kill a bunch of civilians. I was just following orders. Morality washing. It wasn't my fault. My
Mhm.
job is to follow orders, and someone told me to do it. Or like I've in business, like, oh well, our we were supposed to make the most money. It doesn't we have a fiduciary responsibility. Doesn't matter that we like, frauded widows or whatever. It's morality washing. And so whenever you can appeal to a higher thing, like in this case, a quote unquote higher thing will be the one of the ultimate ways of this, would be a religion or an oracle, or in this case, a presumed omnipotent machine. You say, well, it was the right decision because of this, and that conveniently always does the evil thing. It conveniently always gives you license to do evil and not good.
Yeah.
Um, but it is the process of morality washing, which is really what the project that is the Babylonian project. In my opinion, when
Mhm.
you get down to it, it is to create. That is the purpose. That is the ultimate purpose of creating all the false narratives. Is to allow people an effective mechanism to relieve themselves of agency. And that is sort of the battle. And that is why, like, I'm not against the Catholic Church or the Orthodox bros or product or any of them. But like when you step in there and you're like, I go to this and now I relieve myself of all I just follow orders from some hierarchy. I think that's basically no different than signing up with Satan. Because you relieve yourself of the agency of humanity.
Yeah, I mean, you won't even know. And that's the risk, I
Yeah.
guess. I mean, yeah, maybe they're right. I don't know, but um, yeah, I don't. It's weird. Yeah. Well, that's what they're trying to build anyway. Is basically the new God. I mean, I think
Yeah, they're not
like
even shy about that. They talk about it openly.
like they'll say, oh, the the or I want to call it the Oracle. The AI scans the whole internet basically for its content and then kind of synthesizes it and gives you and it does kind of have a way of like writing in an authoritative voice and
Right.
but like of course again there's an editor in there like it it is programmed to select certain kinds of sources and avoid other kinds of I mean it's otherwise,
Yeah.
it would just spit out chaos. Like you can't have order
Yes.
without direction. And like the direction is hidden. We're not shown where it's pointing. You know what I mean? But like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the programmers know, and the programmers are the real gods. That's like in the sense that there's a fake god arising. It's not the AI. It's the people
Well,
who are telling the
it's
AI what to avoid, what
well,
not to
yes
say.
and no. It's sort of like an egregore. It's like in the olden days, the idol makers would make an idol of silver, say, and then bow down to it. Like It's the same process. They're going to build this stuff and then be like, but it must be correct. It's
Yeah.
wild, but that's how human psychology works, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
guys ever uh Cabby, have you ever watched those YouTube videos of people caving like in tight places? You ever seen those?
Like crawling through really tight caves?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen videos.
I've been really into watching these lately, and it feels uh like I don't know why I'm watching them lately. Like I can't tell, is the algorithm pumping it into me? Is it a
You keep
reflection?
watching them, yeah.
Yeah, it could be that. Like well, I mean, obviously they keep showing up on my, my suggested videos, but like I also search for them. And there's a part of me that's been wondering lately, like, is this me? Like, is this my interest? Or are they like, do they like,
Have
they
you
keep,
imbibed an interest that they gave you?
yeah, like, did I
Yeah,
tweet
yeah.
too much about the Jew tunnels in Brooklyn or whatever? And so therefore, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Oh, well,
And so then you
this
can't
is why
distinguish
Taylor Swift
yourself. Yeah, exactly.
is a psyop, even if she doesn't mean to be. Like
Right.
this is what people were missing. Like because I think one of the things that must be understood by people in this space, if you're going to advance past first grade truth or level, is that things happen that are conspiracies which are not planned by at least by human beings. They are, you could call them emergent properties, you could call them organized by spirit beings, whatever you want to say. But there are definitely, like, so for instance, this is why Taylor Swift is unsettling to people, to so many people, not because the CIA is like pumping her up, although maybe they are, I don't know, but because people's interest in her is not genuine. And it can't be. There's no way all these people just suddenly like the same, sort of mediocre music of the same three chords. It is because, like, oh, you like it, so I like it. And if enough people start to like it, and it's like this, it's
Yeah.
just, like you are offloading your desire to basically an algorithm, and it's being fed to you because other people watched it,
Hmm.
that amplifies it, feeds it back out. And so it is unsettling, not because of who she is or whatever, but because it represents the malleability of people's desires.
Right.
And
Yeah.
this
But
is why,
with Taylor Swift too, though, it's the whole system is pushing her out. And they've always done that. Like the music industry has
yeah, yeah,
always
yeah.
picked a big person and just pushed them everywhere. So a huge part of that is she's just being pushed everywhere. And you don't
She
really
is
have
probably
any
being
other
pushed.
options.
Right. But the thing is, like, she also, I mean, in spite of that or whatever, is becoming a big part, a formative part of the lives of so many 13-year-old girls
I don't
who,
know if it's 13-year-old girls, if it's 30-year-old women.
I mean, whatever, whatever.
That's the
Everyone.
other thing that makes it a little unsettling, is
Yeah,
these
but
30-year-old women fangirling like they're teenagers is like, this is a little
yeah, but like the point
inappropriate.
is that, like, yeah, yeah, you're totally right as a, like, as a social phenomenon, but if you sit down with any one of these individuals, you can't distinguish like whether, I mean, it's just, and I see this in myself. Like that's what I'm saying is
Yeah.
like my interests, are they even me anymore? Or am I just like uh another contributor to the like, or like, am I the internet? Like,
Yeah,
am I
this is
just,
what you were saying before. This is, we're having to tackle in real time in a way that, like, Plato only tackled theoretically. We're having to actually tackle the problem of the one and the many,
yeah.
because the boundaries between those are dissolving. And so it's like, well, how do we? And this is why I tell people to go back and listen to Terrence McKenna a lot, because he was way ahead of this a lot. He said, like, with the coming of technology, boundary disillusionment is going to be the main thing people are going to have to deal with. And that is the like, this is what identity politics is. Like, who's American, who's not American, what is the, like, who's in, who's out, is everybody in, are you in, what's a man, what's a woman, what's, this
Hmm.
boundary disillusionment is what technology will bring and is continuing to bring. Terrence McKenna was light years ahead of this on anybody.
Hmm.
And that is the problem where we have to wrestle with, okay, then basically it's the problem of how do you separate the sheep from the goats? Like it is like this, because in like Jesus talks about, there are two conflicting things. There's like that are together. Like I and the Father are one.
Yes.
You know, you are in me, I am in you. There's in one sense where everyone is like part of some cosmic unity,
Mhm.
and then there's like, but also this cleaving off and cleaving away of elements which cannot be integrated.
Right.
And that is where we're having to do that in a practical way now. Like before, like in like Socrates could talk about the one of the many problem and philosophers, and it was like sort of theoretical. This is like real world. What happens? How do you do that? You
Right.
know?
Well, and but also like I suspect that those third and fourth century debates between the Trinitarians and the Arians probably were underneath it about something less. It gets decided, you know, the Arians get described as the heretics or whatever, and then
Uh-huh.
like kind of the origin of the debate gets lost or something, and now we kind of and now it's just like, yeah, well, if you're a Christian, you're a Trinitarian, and it's like, yeah, but I don't know, like there was something interesting going on there, you know, or
Mhm.
I mean, it's or like I have this one of my favorite, you know, the fragments of. By the way, you said earlier about how like the internet. I mean, it's like, you know, if you were a weird, peculiar guy in like 1950 and you got all of a sudden really into this stuff and all of a sudden you found yourself reading in some dusty library, you know, the fragments of Heraclitus,
Mhm.
like the odds of you knowing another soul anywhere on earth who was also interested in that were like approaching zero, unless you were like an Ivy League scholar maybe or something.
Correct.
But now that's not true. Like anyone can just Google the fragments of Heraclitus. I assume many of your listeners will after I talk about this, and then we'll all
I
be on
can
the same
guarantee you
page.
many of them already have. They
Yeah,
already
already
did it
have,
before you talked
and
about it. Yeah.
it's fascinating. And so they probably know the one I'm thinking of, which is where Heraclitus says the one, you know, capital O, the
Right.
one, is both willing and unwilling to be called by the name Zeus.
Right.
And like that is so mind-blowing to me that he said that, that it almost is like I almost it feels like the kind of thing that ought to just silence people for a year. But
Yeah.
we
I
don't
mean,
have like
Lao Tzu said similar in China. You know, he
yes,
said
exactly.
the
And
great
about
Tao
the
flows
exact
everywhere, to the
same
left and to
time.
the right.
Yeah, he
Loves
said
and
it at like
nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. And when it merits our accomplish, it lays no claim. You know,
within
it's like
like
this.
100 years of Heraclitus, like
Yeah.
presumably, supposedly separated, maybe the Silk Road or something. But like,
Right.
yeah, they're saying the same things, they're thinking the same thoughts, and it's like I remember the first time I read some of that pre-Socratic stuff because I was into Heraclitus and Parmenides is saying it's everything is one, and Heraclitus is saying it's all many and it's changing, and you're kind of like it's like it sounds so abstract. It sounds like almost like these guys are
Which is what me and
just
Owen were talking about last week. Like all this abstract things
yeah. But now you
are
realize no,
suddenly sort
it's
of coming to the fore, and like, well, okay, now
exactly
it's a real problem.
yes. And so you see that like for literally 2,500 years, uh, the roots have been buried and now they are at the surface again. And so it's
Hmm.
this like incredible time to be alive. We barely even understand, but like somehow our ancestors, almost like without knowing what they were doing, at least preserved those like semi-sacred texts for us. And
Yeah.
so like amazingly, those are available. And by the way, you know, for like $8.99, you can get a perfectly English translated version of like Josephus or Lucian or anything you want. And nobody buys it. Nobody
Yeah.
reads it. You know what I mean? It's like we're
Yeah.
all too into Taylor Swift, even though like the most, I don't know, just like, yeah, like, you know, I know you guys have heard like Graham Hancock talk about the like 27,000 year cycle of the oscillation of the earth or
Yeah. The
whatever.
great year.
Yeah,
The
it
great year.
feels like we're like really coming awake about that.
Well, that's the
And
thing. It's like this is what, you know,
yeah,
in the early, in like the this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. That
yeah.
was the,
And me,
like
but
we
meanwhile,
astrologically speaking, we really are entering a new age, and this is like the process
but
of that.
also simultaneously, the volume on like the Kardashian channel is turned up and up and up to 10, and like more people are that direct. It's just like I love thinking about the craze of the time that we're in. Uh yeah, because like yeah, in some respect, the internet is just amazing and awesome and like it's just insane to not spend your time thinking about these things. But very few people seem to be able to sustain the interest and attention, I guess.
Too many cat videos.
Too many
Yeah,
guys.
they're cute. I
Yeah.
mean, they're cute. Have you ever, by the way, I mean, have you tried, like, have you looked at TikTok or, uh,
I
like,
I do not I do not
I
like TikTok. It
refuse to
feels like
install TikTok on my phone.
it's, I mean, it's actually kind of psychedelic, like, in a way that, like, it's like, I don't want to bow before it, but I do acknowledge you know, it's, grasp on the psyche. Like, it works, you get it. I like downloaded it, I start swiping, and pretty soon it knows me and it's showing me what I want to see. And it's mostly bikini girls and baseball clips or something. And like you can't, I don't know. It's weird how close it is to the psyche, which is the soul. You know what I mean? Like
mhm.
it feels invasive and dangerous to me. But like we just give it to 10-year-old kids and we go, hey, be quiet out there. I'm trying to watch, Love is Blind.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So just
I have not installed TikTok because I just I don't it doesn't grab me. I think this is what I said. I'm leaving consensus reality. It is like I am somewhat immune to it, even showing me things that ostensibly I would enjoy seeing.
yeah.
It just the format doesn't. I don't know, but it is
And,
it's a dangerous thing for sure.
and
You
on
know not.
my end, it's like I'm not really interested in it, and I'm like a crazy person who has every form of tracking disabled. I have a tiny sticker covering the camera on my
Oh,
phone
right.
so it
Yeah.
can't track my eyes or anything. So a
Mhm.
lot of that kind of, I don't know, doesn't seem to work on me.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I think of it as like I wanted to experience it, and so I try I mean I don't have it anymore, but I tried it and it was like to me it's like all those people who talked about like doing ayahuasca in 2002, it's like they should try TikTok now because
yeah.
I do feel like it's equally mind screwing, It's like I don't know. Yeah, it's like
You're
it's Terrence
telling
McKenna
me on
would have
TikTok.
understood the I'm not talking about for 46-year-old men, really. I was able to, uninstall it and be done with it. But I can see how if you were a 13-year-old kid, you would be forever blind, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah,
I mean, in some ways, this is what people have been saying forever about like
that's
technology, and
true.
people were
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
people are gonna fry their brains on TV, but also those people all ended up being right. So,
Mhm.
so you know, but yeah, the goal of the Babylon system, like I said, is to get rid of your agency, and one of the primary ways it does that is it always wants you to be more engrossed, like to dive into the screen. I've come to call the screen in quotation marks like analogous to the fake reality. Like the screen and the screen, by the way, projects itself beyond the physical confines of the pixels on in a square. It's like it's in a weird way, which I can maybe explain, maybe not. It projects itself out into like 3D reality too. But the screen, it wants you. All that matters to it is that you are engaged in the screen. And people go, "Oh, Sumo, but you're coming to the screen." I know. Morpheus has to go into the Matrix to free people from the Matrix. This is a paradox. Look, I didn't make it up that way. But that's how it works. But it wants you, and this is why, like, truther movements are, in conspiracy culture, are, can be helpful if you're able to break through them. They're like the last spirit. Because, like, a person that wants to think for themselves, how does the screen capture you? It throws up like, oh well, look, because here's the thing about this. There is zero way, if it was quote unquote real, it could do what it does, which is where you're like, I have a thing about a conspiracy. Like pick your favorite conspiracy. It doesn't matter what it is. You go to it, you type it on Google, Wikipedia, you start reading. It leads you. It says, oh, and this is connected to this, and you click it, and then 4 or 5 things. It's like, oh, and it's at the Rothschilds. You go, oh,
Yep.
and then it says, and then it goes ties back to 9/11. No matter what you do, it will lead you on a trail of like pissed on breadcrumbs to be lost in the woods forever. And you're just circling and circling and circling. Basically, you're circling the drain, diving deep. This is what happened to Alex Jones. Alex Jones at one point made some good points, but he has been sort of captured and contained by Babylon by sending him in ever tighter circles, like ants in a death spiral. It's like information ants in a death spiral. That's why it's useful to the point where you can see through it and say, wait a minute, and this is what graduating is. And you say, this is all, you step over it. And if you can't make that leap, then you're
Mhm.
sort of doomed. It's like a layer of hell. Really, it's like one of the circles of Dante's Inferno. Is
Yeah.
like is like the truth. It's like I want to know the truth because there's like where you accept all the things that the screen sells you, and then you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And then what the screen can do is give you every alternative in the world. And you look at it and you go, and it feeds your ego, like, aren't you so smart? You're smarter than those sheeple. And you start, you get in
Right.
these little weird communities. And it just, it's a that is like for a certain kind of person that can grab you and you're just there. And you're trapped. You are now locked in harder than anyone that you're criticizing as a sheeple. And
You
that
know,
is like that's what you have to get past. That's like one of the
like
guardians to the gates of heaven. is that guy you have
yeah,
to beat.
absolutely. Because I think everybody by the time they're like 20 or something has some idols in their life. And like idols are not just little statues, wooden statues of supposed, Greek gods, but they're like things that you think like matter,
Right,
or
right.
like that ultimately matter. Like, do you
Mhm.
remember that scene in Acts 19, the one about the riot at Ephesus where the silversmith
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Demetrius, like it's like a uniquely good like scene, I guess, in the New Testament. And if you haven't read it, Acts 19. But it's like it's the scene where Paul goes to Ephesus and he's like, you got to stop making those silver statues of Artemis. They're not the real God, they're fake. And what's
Right.
interesting to me about it is like before the logos could come, you might say, they had to relinquish something they thought was sacred. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
and it was no small thing. Like that's that same, I think, chapter, interesting chapter where it talks about the black rock that fell from heaven, that they used to
Mhm.
worship in Ephesus. And so it's like they had their own culture, they had their own sense of the sacred, but Paul goes like, you have to let go of that in order to get, the real thing. And I think like this is like a long tradition. It's not just in Christianity either. It's like the Via Negativa thing. They have a tradition of this in Hinduism. There's a good book about this called The Darkness of God by Dennis Turner, if anybody's
Mhm.
really interested. But like, yeah, like even the Greek, the initiation cults that they all did, by the way, from like even before Heraclitus up past, past Aristotle, all those guys, like I think all the way up to, I don't know, Alexander or even later, they did the like initiation at the Delphic oracle thing. And it would be this, they called it incubation, where you would go basically like into a cave for 3 days and probably drink the kykeon psychedelic thing or whatever, but
Mhm.
mainly lie flat on your back without moving in a cave while the shaman guy stood guard at the front of the cave. And you would just, I mean, it would be like an isolation tank, for
Mhm.
3 days, total quiet, don't move. I'll come get you when it's time to wake up. And then when he comes back to get you, there's this whole session about like your hallucinations, or maybe you saw things or visions or dreams and you interpret those things or whatever. But I think the main thing is that 3 day period of removing yourself from the flow and basically having nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
It's the letting go first that allows the new revelation or vision or something like that to actualize or like come into your life, it seems like. So I would be in favor of something like to the point where, as much as I love like art history and all that stuff, there's a part of me that like I'm kind of like you've seen those videos of the environmentalists who go to the art museum and they throw some paint on
Yeah,
the
I sort of
famous
get you.
picture.
Like
I'm
I
like, let's
also I'm
go
like
one
I'm sort
step
of like
further and
good.
actually ruin one. Like, let's ruin one. Like, wouldn't it be
Let's ruin
awesome if
one.
someone
Exactly.
ruined a Botticelli and like forever it was gone? And but they don't even like it's interesting that they don't actually have the guts to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They
No,
like
I'm
they throw like, water-based paint on it, but it can be fixed. But like
right.
yeah, like that guy who smashed the Pieta was probably I don't know, he might have had some interesting takes. I don't know.
Yeah, no, this is you saw this with the Notre Dame thing. Like people are the basically, and I get you. It's a pretty building, right? I got it. It's cool. It's represent, but also it is kind of an idol. Like this, like whole architecture thing. This like worshiping of the past. Like Jesus can become an idol for people.
Mhm.
this is a thing I try to get across to people. Like you can't. I don't know that you can really worship Jesus if you're like unwilling to you can't progress, I guess, because like he says with the apostles, I once called you servants, now I call you friends. Like
Friends.
and
Yeah.
a friend is a different level. Like it's not like a I don't know you can get to that level if you can't in some way, and it's hard to tell to, like some way walk away from him to know it's
Mhm.
like if you meet Jesus on the road, crucify
Kill
him.
him. Yeah, exactly.
Right? Right.
Yes.
Like he had to be crucified in order for us to know him better. And people can
Yeah.
make Jesus into an idol that way, like they're worshiping not he doesn't want to be worshipped. I don't think he wants to be your friend
Yeah.
and
This is
not
why Joseph Smith is so awesome and interesting, isn't it? Like,
Joseph Smith is very interesting. Yeah, for sure. Like some
because
of the
he's
stuff,
kind of yeah, he kind of like
Mormonism is really strange, but a few of the
yeah.
things Joseph Smith said are like, huh, good point, good point.
Well, just like I think I listened to this show about his like initial vision in the forest or whatever,
Hmm.
and it's like you. I mean, I know it's kooky, like some of the the tablets and all that stuff, but like there is a sense that he was really he like maybe it's like it kind of like like imagine Paul's Damascus Road thing. It's
Hmm.
like that gets condensed into this little kind of like 10 verse narrative about how he fell off his horse and there was a light and a voice and but like okay, that's fine as a narrative, but like what act if you had been there that day, uh it might have just looked like, a guy had a seizure or like
Uh-huh.
you know what I mean? Like it still needs a narrative. And so I suspect that like something like the Damascus Road vision has happened not just to Joseph Smith, but to all kinds of people through history. And the real trick is like narrating it, frankly, or like, figuring out if you can like tell it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. I mean, in some sense, like Paul's victory is just that he was so good or something like that, such a good communicator.
Yeah, like the yeah, yeah. I'm not sure where to go, but yes,
Well, like
but
like for like okay, I'll give it
yeah,
to you like the one other way. Like in my Upanishads, I think it's the Chandogya Upanishad. There's this conversation between like I think it's like a I don't know like a student and a teacher. It might be his grandpa or something like that. And he keeps going to the guy like, what is this one you keep talking about? Meaning like
right,
the God or something. And the guy keeps giving these really good like analogies. He says like it is like the river, which in so many different ways flows to the sea, but ultimately becomes the ocean. And you are that,
right.
Shvete Katu. You are that. And then Shvete Katu goes, wow, interesting. Can you tell me more? And it's like he didn't get it. You know what I mean? So the guy
Hmm.
has to go, oh, well, it's like how bees gather honey from so many different flowers, but ultimately they are resolved into honey, and you are that, Shvete Katu. And Shvete Katu's like, wow, that's fascinating. Tell me more. And it's like you're not like if you got it, you wouldn't continue asking for examples. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You would just glow or something. I mean, I don't know what would happen, but
Well, that's
yeah.
what Alan Watts used to say about people that did psychedelics. He said if you were actually getting the message, you'd hang up the phone. You know,
Right.
like
Right.
you wouldn't have to keep going back to it, which again is what Terrence McKenna said. You know, at some point he started feeling like a fraud. He said, "I haven't done psychedelics in like 15 years." Like he said toward the end of his life, you know, and I'm known as this like, but you know, he was like, "I feel like I did it, you know, and I don't have to do it anymore." And like, I think that
Yeah.
the there's no, I think people that do it for they think that the truth is in the experience, you know, like that is they're like turning it into an idol basically. And I agree with
Well,
you.
that's
That's what people are doing with art and like West, in some ways, Western tradition and so forth. Like,
mhm.
you know, you really we should just pick one at the Louvre and destroy it.
Dude, that would
You
be
know,
here.
not
Here would be. I mean, I'm not gonna say this, but like,
not like as a terrorism act, but like
no, but
as a
like
vote.
an
Yeah,
absolutely surefire way to start a new religion would be for to like to insist that, part of the initiation rite was to smash, some cherished cultural object or something. And I mean, the way they like the gangs used to require like a murder supposedly or something to get in.
the
Like all you have
Bible
to do
should
is,
be reverentially burned every Easter
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
because like you can turn that into an idol.
Yeah.
You know, like 100%. That'd be like it is
Mhm.
and it's hard to explain to people, but it's thinking it lies there rather than like
Mhm.
what it
Eternity.
what it's
Yeah.
supposed to do to you. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And it's thinking it's like it's again it's externalizing. It's an agency removal thing. It's saying like I'm offloading my soul into this other thing, and that
Yeah. I
gives
mean,
me the security. Yeah.
the reason this is hard for people is because, I have this conversation all the time, and one of my best friends always says to me, well, like, yeah, but you wouldn't know all this stuff. I mean, he knows how much I like the Bible. I'm always reading it and stuff, and you wouldn't even have the Bible if this were true, because people wouldn't have preserved it so carefully and whatever. But my response to that is like, I honestly think I would be okay even without the Bible. Like, I think that I would still know God. I would, in some sense, still know Christ. Like
Hmm.
the mind of Christ would still be available, like even
Well,
without
and
the Bible, because
Saint
it's
Paul says
true.
that.
Like,
Saint Paul says that himself. He's like, you
yeah,
know, like the things of God have made known to you from what has been made.
yeah,
You know, but we
yeah,
just,
exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
this is like a further bonus to have this revelation of the Bible. It's not.
No, so it's awesome to have it, and like you
Yeah,
should read it, and I like reading it like as much as anybody. But yeah, the truth is this. I mean, I don't know. I guess we're just articulating like non-attachment Christianity, or Vedanta Christianity or something, but
yeah.
it's a cool idea anyway.
Well, it's like it's not. I'm not saying we burn every copy. I still want to pass down copies to the future. I'm saying like you need a reminder of like actually like the human being that is supposed to have the Holy Spirit in them, saved by Christ and so forth, united to the mystical body of Jesus and all that, is of a higher status than even the Bible. Like you get to go to the Bible doesn't get to go to heaven.
Right.
The Bible doesn't judge angels. The Bible isn't a friend, isn't a co-heir with Jesus. You are, right? And so like when you it is a thing, it can be a thing, and the church can be that too. People do that with like Protestants idolize the Bible, Catholics idolize the church,
Right.
and Eastern Orthodox do a little of both. They idolize the church fathers, which is weirder. Don't do that. But but they you know they all got this thing of like, well, you know, in some ways, again, I think that's what the Babylon system want. That is like, it's a refusal to self-identify with God, which is what Jesus invites you to do. You and
Right.
I shall be
Because
one, that they shall be one, even
mhm,
as we are one.
yeah.
You know, and it's like, well, no, I can't because you're setting up this thing in between you, like that's how I get there, and
You know
that
what it is,
allows
dude?
you, it offloads your responsibility.
The thing in between
Yeah,
is literally called the media, right? Like
exactly.
the media,
Yes,
like
it's the
media
media.
means it's the thing in between you and your truth, like the true experience of truth and God and
Right.
reality. And like we put in between us something. And that's what I meant earlier about idols. Like everybody goes like, well, I can't just navigate this. I can't just learn to discern. And to some degree, that's probably true, especially for children. But I
Hmm.
think that like this is why like initiation cults or like some sort of like leveling up bar mitzvah, something baptism for the Baptists. I think they do it around age 13
Hmm.
usually, but like some sort of initiation that recognizes you, like now you're responsible. That's
Right.
missing from our culture. And most people really are just they'll do anything. They'll do anything to avoid that responsibility. It's like, please put someone over me who is responsible for making these decisions. So it's like, give me a priest, give me a Bible, give me a statue I can pray to or
Give
something.
me an AI,
Yeah,
give
give
me
me
the
the
media,
oracle,
give
anything.
me a university,
Please
give me,
don't
yeah,
make me, live like Abraham did before the law came and just listen to God, like
right.
directly, you know, which is, and if you say that, by the way, again, this is one of the, because, like, who do you think you are? Abraham or something. And of course, it's like, it's funny. My favorite thing is when you're talking to people about this stuff and they start quoting the Pharisees, like
They
in
do
John
without even
chapter.
realizing it. They will throw out the
Yeah.
same arguments the Pharisees did
Yeah, yeah, and
every
then you
time.
just you
And
just go like,
I've done that too. I'm not judging them. Like
sure, yeah,
I've
it
been in that
happens, it
position as
happens.
well.
But it's like it is an amazing moment when you realize like you kind of know your line, which is you're supposed to say like, well, before Abraham was, I am, like, and
Yeah.
that's when like
I
you're not allowed to say that. Like, of course, that sort of is against the rules, but it's kind of yeah, it's kind of what Jesus was inviting us into, I think.
I literally did this one time with oh, where was it? It was somewhere like in an airport. It wasn't the Hare Krishnas because I don't think they do that anymore. But it was some like Buddhist sect and they were going around like sort of proselytizing, which is weird for Buddhists. But they were like handing out stuff, and he tries to hand me something, and I knew the line to say, right? And so I just said it. I said, he's like handing it to me. I said, "Does the Buddha need a teacher?" And he just sort of like, "Okay, you got," like as if
Yeah,
I was the, which
yeah,
is so stupid. Like it was just I just knew that was what we were supposed to say. From
right,
I felt like I won the little game that we were playing,
right,
but
exactly.
but
Yeah,
it's like it does become very formulaic. Like like when you start like getting into these things with people, they want to, and this is why they kill. This is why, I mean, Jesus had to die on one level from a prophecy and like a sin forgiveness perspective, but like on another level, they had to kill him because he was saying like, "Hey, you do it."
right.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
you like people would come to him and be like, "Hey, decide between us." He's like, "Who put me judge between you?"
Mhm.
Which is a crazy thing for God to say. Um,
Right. Yeah.
and so that is like, well, we can't have that. We need to
Yeah,
do all
yeah,
this.
and like everyone has that kind of line in their heads where they kind of accept like, maybe John the Baptist and Jesus and Paul and the apostles on Pentecost and maybe all the way up through the church fathers. There are sort of miracles or revelations or even like Teresa of Avila or I don't know how late it goes, but then they go, but that doesn't happen anymore. And so
Hmm.
if you say like, yeah, yeah, I just kind of like listen to God and do what he tells me to do, like that's illegal. Like it's basically that's how you end up in a schizo tank. They send you to the nursing home or whatever. You're one flew over the cuckoo's nest because it's like that's against the rules in our society. But like it was in Jesus's society too. Like that's why they called him and John the Baptist and Paul crazy. And they all had to say, I am not mad, most noble fest.
Right.
It's like it's this kind of shit test, I guess, from civilization, who again basically just insists that you defer to the media. And the media is, the media, but it's also anything that comes
The
between
mediator,
you
the
and
thing, yeah.
the big self.
Well, and that's the other level of that is I think you have to accept that the media in the big sense of like whatever that is, either the actual like CNN or like the mediator, is there for a purpose. Like it's not actually quote unquote bad. Like it is there because people want it and need it. And
Probably,
if you took it away, they just create another one. It's like Animal Farm exists because the animals mostly want it, and
right.
and you can choose to go off the farm at any time. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. You can choose it at any time you want. It's right here. Do you want to do it? And people say no. Because going out on your own is it can be scary. And I mean like
Yeah,
actually
dude. It's what's a good
actually not only intellectually, but like this is what Jesus is talking about when he's like, hey, don't worry about tomorrow.
right.
Don't
Yeah.
don't worry about it, man. Do you believe in God or not? Like do you believe in God or not? Like, what are you doing worried about people like, but I have to like give my life
Mhm.
to a company because the company will give me bread. It's like Lord comes from loaf. Who gives you your
Right.
bread? Who is your master? Who is your Lord? And most people do not want to, and not, not a judgment call. Everyone's at a different place, but they do not want to take that leap of faith and say, God is the giver of the loaf and I'll be fine. And therefore I
Yeah.
am free. This is it's the story of coming out of Israel over and over again, or coming out of Egypt.
What's a kind of a fun um, thing you can on a Saturday kind of feel this. It's not as risky as what we're describing, but is to just kind of get in your car and put your phone in the like glove box or something and
Uh-huh.
just drive until you're lost. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it's a fun, it takes maybe a half an hour at most to get to a place you've never been before. And, make sure you've got enough gas, I guess. Like this doesn't have to become, like, a scary thing. I'm just saying, but like there's a feeling of exploration that I think people kind of forget as they get older. They get the job, it's the commute back and forth to the baseball diamond or whatever you're doing with your kids, and that becomes your life. But it's fun to, find the edge of the map, I guess, and
Mm-hmm.
then go a little farther. And again, like I said, kind of live like Abraham for just 10 minutes. Like go according to your, kind of like your whim or what you believe your turn right or left,
Right.
uh,
And just
and
trust
like
it's going to be okay.
yeah, be responsible for it. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
I think that's a fun experiment.
And that is, and people would, people, I've wondered why this is. I think, and this gets into like discussion of like hell and heaven and so forth, but people really need there to be a right answer and for there to be consequences for getting it wrong. Have you noticed this?
Mhm.
They like, and it comes to everything. Like this is like what drives the environmental movement. Like, well, we can't just have it good and it not have a bad side. There has to be something bad happening, or like people will be like that's wasteful. It's not uh environmentally friendly. Like, you there should be something bad that happens if you don't do it right. And it's like, what if there are no consequences though?
Mhm.
What if there genuinely are no consequences? Like because people really want there to be like, well, he needs to go to hell because of the consequences of
Right.
doing it wrong. And right. And I need that to happen so that, but if you ask yourself, why do you need that to exist? It's because you need there to be a correct quote unquote path, you know, and you don't, you don't want, this is why they want a bad thing to happen to their political rivals. They think it should, and they get frustrated when it doesn't. Like, well,
Yeah.
they did
Yeah,
all the
they're not
wrong
just
things. They
like
should be
different,
beaten
they're
up for it.
bad. Yeah.
What now?
Well, they're not just different or like misguided, but they're bad. If
Right.
we could get rid of them, then everything would be good. I mean, this is one of those. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's just like, and that it doesn't happen, and people don't take the hint that God's like, I'm not into the consequences thing. I'm forgiving everybody. And
Right.
because it's because like, it's fine, and that's not to say that there is no right or wrong, like morally. Like I don't think like you should go murder someone and be like, oh, it's okay. I mean, like, but on one level, no matter what you do,
Right.
it can be forgiven, and people hate that so much.
Well, this is also the fear is
They
like
hate that
people
so much.
people kind of hear me try to describe this sometimes, and their response is like, "Oh, so I can just go murder."
Yeah,
Well, like,
it's like, well,
why is that your
sorta, if you
like
wanted
that's
to. but you don't.
right.
Yeah, exactly. Why is that what your brain wants to go
Like,
do?
I don't think they're understanding me. I'm always kind of
Right.
like, I mean, no, you could go swimming. Like, why would you murder someone? Like, that's like not on my list, you know. So like if you were to try to live like this is, I mean, I make a lot out of that. I mentioned a couple of years ago, I kind of developed that very eccentric Christianity. And basically it's like an anti-legalist, antinomian kind of thing based around like that mainly, I mean, some of like Romans 4 and that section in Galatians 3 where Paul talks about the 430 years between Abraham and Moses where there was no law yet.
Yeah.
So like, so how is Abraham not only justified, but like, how did he live? You know,
Hmm.
and we have that scene with Abraham and Isaac, and it's like, okay, well, he didn't have the Ten Commandments yet, but presumably he knew, you know, killing your own son was kind of iffy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, duh. But still, it's like, I don't know. I mean, I guess to me, that's like it's a fascinating arena to imagine living in where there aren't codes written in stone yet. You're kind of just wandering in the desert, but like still there is a right thing to do. The right thing to do is like what God tells you to do. And he like I know I guess we do have this one case of Abraham supposedly being told to murder his son. But like, you know, so far, I don't know, this is kind of how I live. And like mostly God just kind of tells me to like, you know, I don't know, like kind of I don't know, whatever I want to do, like mow my lawn and go for walks and you know, enjoy the woods and eat plantain chips. Like it's not it, like when I said I felt like the world is on my back, often I feel like I'm Atlas. Some days I feel like I'm trying to save the world. It's like it's weird how easy it is. Like the yoke is light. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but still it's something. It's like it is there. I mean, I do have to you know, get out of bed and like drive my daughter to her thing before school. But like that's not that bad, you know? And I think like when you do it, like that's what God wanted you to do today. And like of course there can't be commandments for every plausible possible human situation. And so we have to navigate like that. It's like I don't know. Yeah, it
Well,
requires listening to God. You know, I don't know
well,
how to
like
put
going
it.
back to Abraham, Paul says the law was given so that you would sort of so that you would know you don't need it.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that's
right.
what he gives it to you. He's like it's given so that you know you can't fulfill it.
Right.
Basically, like
Yeah.
you would give it so you knew you would fail every time, and so therefore the only option available to you is to trust to mercy, right? Which is to
Yes.
trust that
Yeah, that's what it is.
that all consequences can be forgiven, and that is sort of the good news. Like you, any law you set up, you will fail at.
It's
And that
such
is
great
why God
news.
gave you the commandments to know you couldn't do that.
It's such great news. Like, and this is the thing.
Yeah.
This is why, like, when
And it's
I,
so profound. Like that is such a profound move
yeah,
to like give people the law to so that they would see they can't keep it
but
is
this was like one of
so
the questions that like really bothered me 10 years ago was like, what was so good? If you were in Ephesus or Corinth or
uh-huh.
Rome, who cares? Like some guy in Jerusalem got crucified, even if he came back to life, if he's their Messiah, like who cares? What is good about that for me? And I had a hard time understanding that until, yeah, I processed it just like you said, which is like, oh, like I'm basically free. I just need
correct.
to listen to God. And like that's freedom.
You're free of Babylon completely if you
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
be.
yeah, exactly.
Kingdom of
And it's
heaven is at hand and it never left. Even Eden is right there if you're willing to
yeah,
step into it. It's
it's
right
awesome.
there,
You can
you
go to the
know?
batting cage tomorrow or like Cedar Point or you know what I mean? Like, and it's
Yeah.
legal. Like that's awesome. What a
Yeah,
country.
if I'm not telling people what to do, but if you are in a state where whatever you're doing, you like hate it all the time, you can just not do that. Like all these things that you fear will happen if you don't, if you don't, it will not happen.
Yeah.
Like all these like you can be free of Babylon instantaneously.
Yeah.
It's
But
just the
you
only
have to
thing that
like
keeps you from doing it is fear, which is the opposite of faith.
that's the thing. And but like that's no small we should mention. I mean, you
It's no
have to
small thing.
actually
It is
kind of
no
hold.
small thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you have to like be true, which is hard because
Yeah.
there's a lot of incentives to be fake, you know?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Like
So you might
if you
even get
do
like
it,
fired. For example, like you might get fired, your family might think you're crazy. You might lower your social status. You know what I mean? Those
right.
kinds of things. So
But
like consider it carefully.
those things are if I have found if you just you do have to be truthful about it. When you get into trouble is when you try to like half-ass it and you're like, I'm gonna walk out freely, but I still want to like lie about my motivations and what I'm doing, and I'm sort of scared this will happen, so I'll be deceitful. That's when you get into a lot of problems. You have to
Right.
sort of 100% go for it, and then it people will initially think you're crazy, but then after like a little while, it's like, oh, I get it. I see what he's
Right.
doing. Makes sense, you know. And like, um, and like all the like social status stuff is like, well, that's a choice to think
By the way,
think
I
that
don't mean
matters or
to.
accept it. Yeah.
I just want to go on record and say that like I feel that I'm still like in the process of learning to really trust it. You know,
Oh,
like
me
maybe
too. Me too, for sure.
like for example, I was saying to my wife yesterday, like there's a part of me that kind of lately has wanted to, I'm a very like vanilla bread looking white guy with short hair and just plain. But there's a part of me that's been in the mood lately to like get like maybe wear 6 or 7 rings on my fingers and a gold chain and like like just big ornate clothes and grow my hair long or something. And I know that like everyone in my life would kind of be like, "Are you okay, man? Why are you doing this? You look weird. It's bad style or whatever." But you know, it's like maybe I'll just do it just because that's like, you know, it's kind of like this bear avatar. Like I want to be the avatar and you know what I mean? Like be
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
Well,
why
it
not?
can be, yeah, yeah, it's like another social, and that's the thing. Like I did went through a period where I would wear ridiculous things just to get over the fear of looking silly.
Yeah. Yeah. Another
You
good
know,
exercise probably.
oh yeah, I mean, like I got the idea from Saint Philip Neri, who was or Nigiri, I forget, but he would shave half of his face and walk around town like with
Oh,
half
great.
a beard and half
Yeah.
not. Just he said, you should get over worrying what people think about you, and that was his spiritual exercise to
Mhm.
do that. And so I would like occasionally go to the gas station and pump gas wearing a kimono or something, you know, just like, just looking completely silly. But
Yeah, that's a
like
good one.
after you start doing it, it's like, well, it doesn't matter. I don't care, what the people think. You can be free of that.
Because your self-conception or your ego is
Correct.
another idol. Like it's another one of those
Yes.
things that kind of you kind of like stage it, you know, and then that becomes, yeah,
Yeah,
you
that's a
almost,
beautiful way of saying it. You stage it, you set it up. You're like, this is what I should present to the world as. This is me.
mhm.
Look, everybody. Look at my staged. And that itself is another mediation. It's another media between, you know, you and God.
Yeah,
It's that,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Which is, I guess, what the Buddhists are talking about. Although I must say, I find most Western Buddhists at least to be ridiculous.
Yeah.
They're very,
See, what's weird about that is I find Eastern Buddhists to be ridiculous
I
only
don't have
because,
as much experience with them
okay,
to
well, like
say.
I've met, I had this thing one time, a bunch of the Tibetan monks came to campus 10 years ago or something for a week, and I was like the committee host guy. So I got to hang out with them a lot. And I remember the monastery that we were dealing with had like particularly devoted itself to this, like I think he was like 8th or 10th century, um, like Buddhist monk named Nagarjuna.
Uh
And
huh.
Nagarjuna was really interesting. I bought his book, and he's kind of like a logician. He reminds me of like Wittgenstein or something.
Okay.
Rather than just for example, like in the West we have like Aristotle who kind of makes, you know, things either are or are not. Nagarjuna adds two more, which is that so a thing can be, not be, or both be and not be, or neither be and not be. So he has like a quadrant
Uh
rather
huh.
than just a duality. Anyway, so I like spent, you know, 16 hours reading that stuff that week, and I finally worked up the courage to sit down next to one of these monks. And all, by the way, all week they were doing one of those really ornate, you know, the sand mandala thing that
Oh, I
they
love the
do.
sand mandalas. Then
Oh,
you
it's
brush it away.
what
Yeah.
a cool thing. but anyway, so I sat next to him and I'm kind of, looking at the sand mandala and I whisper to him and I go like, thank you for visiting. This has been so enlightening. And then I go like, I said something about Nagarjuna and how I'd been studying him and what does this mean? And the guy was kind of like, oh, we mostly just make copies. Like it was like
Yeah.
he had never thought of it. Like none of that was very interesting to
Yeah.
him.
It's like we mostly just you weren't supposed to take it seriously, bro.
Yeah, and like the robes, like I came to realize that like, they're wearing those maroon robes and
Yeah, yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But like, we find out the story of them. They were, I mean, they were basically like kicked out of their homeland, and so they went to India where like basically anyone's welcome. And then they kind of like they're like a diaspora. They tried to keep their culture alive,
Uh-huh.
and so now they like tour the United States trying to make money being themselves, I guess. But it's like there's nothing peculiarly interesting about their clothes either. It's just like this is just what we wear. It'd be like if we showed up, in Tibet wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt and they were like, look at your, oriental, your occidental clothing is so
Yeah.
interesting or whatever. But yeah, I mentioned that because like, yeah, my wife took a class on Buddhism too in college, and she had the same thought, which was like, in some ways, what happens is they get into their little sects and they have their little rituals, and it's like they basically do the same thing we in the West do, and they also lose sight of the shell, the soul perspective that you were talking about.
Hmm.
And so it's like, oddly enough, probably they would find, Western Christian texts to be supremely interesting, and it would like really stimulate them. Whereas for many of us, it kind of is boring and
Yeah, if I
tiring.
could speak Chinese, I think this would go on fire in China.
Oh, this
I think
show?
we
Oh
could
my God, it would
if I could speak
revolutionize the
Chinese.
country. Yeah.
But Cavi just returned from China.
Where,
Cavi, how do you think
Cabby?
that is true?
I did.
How did you have any experience with the Chinese Buddhism or anything?
So I don't understand Chinese Buddhism,
Yeah,
and maybe you can like help me understand this. Because my understanding of Buddhism is basically that you're trapped in this endless cycle of suffering and reincarnation, and the only way to free yourself from it and achieve nirvana is to stop desiring anything, right?
correct. Yeah, yeah,
So every time I've been to a Buddhist temple, and I've been to like a bunch of Buddhist temples in a bunch of different Asian countries, and every time I go in there, I see just like random people, like local people, will go in and they'll light incense and they'll pray for like money and
yeah,
health
yeah.
for their family and all
Yeah.
these various things that they're desiring. So I don't understand how that works.
Well, that's
Yeah,
the
they even
beautiful
have
thing,
the
right? It's like
wheels.
they could easily just say, like, I thought you guys were supposed in a similar way to have faith in all things, and then you come in there and you pray about all your problems.
It's the
it's the
same as
same
like
problem.
there's like, there's a million Catholics or whatever in mass. I'm not picking on Catholics in particular. This could be, I'm just thinking of, I was going to make a fun of a Boston Red Sox fan who, works at the gas station, and he's like kind of Catholic or whatever. It's like, yes, he's Catholic, but like Meister Eckhart was also Catholic.
Right.
And like, so in Chinese Buddhism, it's like, yeah, you can, it's like I'm sure that's true of the people who stumble in occasionally to these temples, but I mean there were true weirdo mystics who went to the top of the mountain and starved themselves to death or whatever. And so in other words, they have their, I don't know, like actual tradition also, and then but like most people just, spin the wheels as they walk past them on their way into the temple to light some incense. And I've seen people leave mass before the benediction is said because they got their little wafer, it's like time to go. And it's the same thing. It's like that just exists, I guess, everywhere. But yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Cavi, where'd you go in China?
This time I was in a city called Xiamen, but only
Is
for
it
like 1 week.
is it one of the big ones? Like,
It's like a medium big one.
okay, interesting. Because like, yeah, like China's got like, I don't know, 30 or more cities with three,
A
four
ton.
million plus people
Yeah,
in them.
they've got like 40 New York cities together, but
Major
you
metropolises,
never hear of any of them over here. Yeah, yeah.
no, yeah, it's a pretty amazing place actually. But um anyway, Yeah, that's cool. And that's true, by the way. I just think that's true of like I one time I met this girl in I did a like study abroad when I was in college where I went to places like that. And I think it was in Hong Kong. I met this girl who told me she was a Catholic Buddhist.
Hmm.
And I was of the age where I didn't yet, I was kind of like I was the policeman, so I was like, well, you can't be that,
Right,
you
right,
know.
right, right, right. You
And I
can't be
remember
that.
this girl, cute girl, she was like 4'11" or something, named Priscilla, and she was like, she kind of just looked at me and was like, "Well, I'm being that," you know. And it and
Yeah.
it and like that was all it took, really. I kind of was like, "Oh, well, okay."
Are you
So I guess
familiar
that
with Bede Griffiths?
who? No, what's the name?
Bede Griffiths. He was a
Mm-mm.
he he uh he was an English he was an Englishman who was a Catholic, but he was part of the Christian ashram movement
Oh, okay, cool.
in South India. He became a yogi slash and a Benedictine monk. He was actually a lifelong friend of C.S. Lewis. They were like bosom buddies.
Hmm.
And Griffiths was actually there at Lewis's bedside when he was dying. But he basically he went to India and he was like doing sun salutations and everything. And people would
Yeah,
ask him, "How can you do this if you're if you're Christian?" And he said, "Because it's Catholic. Like Catholic
yeah,
is like universal. Like very interesting fellow. He had a lot to. And people see that and they think you're abandoning truth or you're abandoning your doctrines. And his
mhm,
response to that was, "You can only do what I do if you are very grounded in your own tradition to the point where you understand it and you can incorporate other things without compromising it," which I
yeah,
thought was an interesting answer.
yeah. That's cool.
But yeah, so he was because so he basically had a a whole like he basically had an ashram dedicated to the Holy Trinity in India. Um, and did like the whole he was like it was like a yogi setup and everything. But and it's one of the sides of C.S. Lewis that you know because people see C.S. Lewis and they think, oh, here's Mr. like
Mhm.
reasonable and orthodox and like especially Protestants, they see him as like this like super orthodox guy. And yet like his best friend is over there doing sun salutation yoga in India to as like a bridging the gaps in these other places,
Yeah. I
you
mean,
know.
I tried a couple of years ago to make this like you mentioned 2016 and how things started to feel like they were coming apart, and I think a lot of people were scrambling for like ways forward. And for me, it felt like, oh, okay, let's like really double down on Christian identity or something like that.
Yeah, and it's yeah,
But
yes.
well, I tried to like make that work, and this is what like I got, I kind of redoubled my seriousness about kind of like reading. Like I hadn't really read church fathers much before then, or like whatever, all that stuff. And so but I've made the effort to do that. And honestly, I mean, maybe I could be wrong. People, I know a lot of people disagree with me, but to me, it's like there is a kind of fundamental essence in Christianity. I mean, even from the fact that like it started, like it, I mean, part of my argument is that like the reason that Jesus had to be Jewish was in some sense because like if Socrates had gone to Jerusalem and announced to them, hey, all the cave, like, you know, come out of it or whatever. Like they don't listen to outsiders. Like in other words, Judaism was the most tribal, like they weren't letting go. They were very much about holding on to their tribal traditions.
Right.
And so like in some ways, Jesus and the apostles were like kind of about being willing to open the doors. And it's like, I look, man, I think it's bullcrap what the oligarchs and globalists are doing, flooding America with all kinds of immigration. It's like that's stupid, it's disruptive and bad and unnatural. But at the same time, like to treat Christianity as like an isolationist uh thing, it kind of doesn't square with itself. Like it doesn't work that way. So I
Well,
think I'm
you
not
know,
saying it's full Hinduism and like
yeah.
everything should be welcome and it's all ecumenical all the way down, but I think the idea of like muscular, you know, Christian, like I don't know. It just, and I understand that there were the Crusades and that stuff happened, and maybe you could justify it, but fundamentally, it just doesn't feel authentic to me to try to make it do that work for us.
Well, this is this is a thing that's been in there from the very beginning, because in some ways, like choosing a chosen people and working through that is part of the way the one and the many problem is solved.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
this is like, people think like all these Old Testament laws are like meaningless, like have no mixed fabrics,
Right.
like it's one of them, like don't have a clothing made of two different kinds of fabrics. You're like, what is that about? That's crazy. And it's about having very sharp borders between things, right? And then, interestingly, you
Well,
get to,
before you move
yeah,
on, that's literally the Hebrew root word of sacredness, of holiness, is kadosh.
correct,
It means separateness, right?
separateness,
So
right?
they
Like,
had that as a, see, this is like, I mean, this is pretty esoteric and arguable, I guess, but like that is a particular view of holiness. But my problem is, as you read Christianity, like the veil on the temple is rent in twain, and
mm-hmm.
we take communion like that. For Christianity, separation isn't really the notion of holiness. It's more like union, like, or
Well, see, this is the point I'm getting at. When
yeah, go
when
ahead.
when they, because originally had no mixed fabrics, right? Is the idea.
Mhm.
And the
And don't eat pork and
don't eat pork.
circumcise and yeah.
Okay. And then the first thing the church does when they start having, like, just so you're saying, communion, the like cloth they made to hold the communion bread on,
Mhm.
purposely made it out of two different kinds of fabrics.
Mixed
Two,
fabrics.
well, I forget, I think linen and another, and they were
Ah,
it
I
was
didn't know
linen and
that. That's
wool,
awesome, man.
linen and
That's
wool,
awesome.
because it was like the sheep and and like the, and it was because it was an acknowledgement of like there is a way to have both.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot be, if like, imagine your body. If your cells had no borders between them, you would die instantaneously.
Mhm.
Right? They have to have borders, but you also have to have passage back and forth for the sharing of information and nutrients and cooperation. And so like this problem goes all the way down to like and this is why I said the body, like the human being is more holy than the Bible, because like you are the, like when it talks about your body as a temple, that
Right.
is means it in a very literal sense. Like, you're solving the problem of the cosmos just by being alive as an organism,
Yes. Yeah.
right? And so like the one in the many, you're a multicellular organism, and like the blood cells in my foot have no idea probably about the neurons in my brain, yet they're all working together as the same thing and part of a larger whole they don't understand. And that requires both separation, holiness, and profanity, like the mixing. It
Right.
requires both of those things to happen. Like, and that's why, like, the whole like Jew Gentile distinction. And Paul's like, there is a Jew, there is a Gentile, but also it makes no difference.
Mhm.
What they're getting at is solving the one and the many problems, so that there is individuals and individuality in the world, and at the same time, in the fulfillment of all things, they are united to God and to everything, right? And then like
Yeah.
you get to have your cake and eat it too. You don't lose yourself in God, but you are connected to God and yourself at the same time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that's it's the whole thing, and that's what like we were going back to the internet is forcing us to, like, these big abstract problems are we're having to wrestle with them in real
Well,
time.
it's also like if you read the like Josephus's narrative of the Jewish War, it's such a good, it's so everyone should be talking about Josephus's Jewish War. I can't recommend it strongly enough. It's so interesting, especially if you've read the Bible a couple of times, because it presents this world. He gives the history of the 100 or so years leading up to the battle in 66 to 70 AD. And what you see is that like there's this process happening of Hellenization and
Mm-hmm.
Roman occupation. And so like basically it's breaking down. It's like they had tried, he describes the way that the temple was built and they had the courtyard for the Gentiles, and
Mm-hmm.
they had, it's basically like they made it to the end of the attempt to live by this principle of separation, and it ended in kind of complete self-destruction. Like he talks about how their men were, first of all, you had the zealots who are like stabbing people who aren't acting the right way, and there's men who are cross-dressing and sodomizing each other, and the kings are all messed up, and it's like it was such a disaster on like a kind of an unparalleled breakdown of a civilization. And so like into that world, you can see the need for literally the need for a new deal, right? A new covenant. It's
Right.
like because the old one just like crash landed. And so, okay, we got that. I love thinking also about there was this like basically pogrom of the Jewish diaspora in Alexandria in 38 AD, which is like right at the time when Christians would have first arrived in Alexandria, where you had this conflict happening again between Jew and Gentile Greek, Romans, maybe native Egyptians to some extent. So all these problems of like tribal disintegration and integration and so on. And so that's the world where Christianity spread. And you can understand it then as this like great news, that yes, like we can resolve these things kind of. But now
Hmm.
my concern is that like we've done our 2000 years or whatever. Even Revelation says this, like after 1,000 years, the devil will be like let out again or something, or
Right.
however it's phrased. But like it may be that we've now reached the kind of the end point of this other next covenant or something like that, and some other adjustment needs to be made or new revelation or something. And I know that some people will argue that like Islam was that or that whatever, but to me it feels like the problems are so similar to what they were dealing with in that first century that it's like time for a kind of serious revisit, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, and so yeah, and we're gonna do it. It's gonna be good. We're gonna figure it out. There's no reason to fear everybody. All these problems are solvable, and this is the show where we're gonna do that at, and the new rebranded show that is coming up soon. Um, yeah. Anyway, it's been like 2 hours, so we should probably wrap up, or the people will not. The video and the thing will
Yeah.
be too long.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's been great. Kavi, sorry for talking over you the whole time, but good talking to you
No
too.
worries. You're probably more interesting sounding than I am.
I
Tell
came
tell
in,
us the most interesting thing you saw in China before we go, or in the Asia, because you spent your time in Asia.
Oh, the coolest thing probably on this trip was I went to Cambodia for a week, and
Uh-huh.
just seeing all like the temple ruins and stuff there was probably the coolest thing I saw.
Now, I know your wife is Chinese. Was she raised Buddhist, or is she still Buddhist, or?
No, they're very like what's the word? Atheistic there, I guess.
Uh-huh.
There's no religion with anyone. There's like Buddhist temples that are like to exist. Your average Chinese person is very
yeah, it's like France or something.
So like France, churches everywhere, but no one goes to them.
maybe. They're superstitious though. Like Chinese people are super superstitious, but
What
Really?
about in
not any
Cambodia?
sort of religion.
Are the Cambodians religious or are they the same way?
That I don't really know because I kind of just like did touristy stuff. But I know
Yeah.
they went back and forth through history. They were like super Hindu at one point, and then later they all converted to Buddhism.
Mhm.
So there's a mixture of ancient Buddhist temples, ancient Hindu temples, and all that kind of stuff. Right,
Yeah.
and it's probably most people are just kind of like poor and doing whatever they can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have to get to the Asian market. I don't know how we're going to do that, but this show we have to get into the Asian market.
The show's
Dog Moon,
banned. You know.
what
This is
what now?
great. This is the AI can probably translate it for us. It's
Well,
perfect.
this is what I'm appointing you to do, Dog Moon. This is your job.
I'll see.
You you get the show to the Asian market.
Okay.
That's your mission. Well, thank you, everyone. We will see you next time on Soul / the Mystical American Patriot Society.
Thanks, guys.
Peace out. And we're done. Looky there. Let me
Thanks.